Now, for some odd reason, people sort of think welding is healthy. And what I mean by that is they try to, minimize what it does to you and maximize what it, the benefits of it. And actually, it's the other way around. There's no way around it. You're definitely trading in your health for money, no matter what you do. Now, in the shop here, I'm lucky because I can control the environment. Therefore, I can limit my exposure to that smoke. That being said, I know I'm still trading in my health for money. So the first thing I have in the shop is this here. And I actually have an overhead assembly that I built. And here's where the vacuum hose goes. So whenever I'm welding, this guy here is as close to the weld as possible so that most of the fumes get sucked right out of the shop before they have a chance to go into your lungs. I remember when we had welding labs at college, and you'd be welding it for 5 or 6 hours straight, and it'd just be a cloud everywhere of smoke from the welding process. If you're doing flux core arc welding, that smoke was massive. If you're doing shield metal arc welding, you still have the smoke, but it's not as bad. And we had those vents. Every lab, every booth had a vent, but it doesn't matter. There's so much smoke generated by it. It's something you gotta really keep in mind. And yeah, it will rust out. I totally believe that because mild steel, it just rusts. But there's a lot of stuff in that weld process that will not rust out. So be careful with your health. And whenever you're welding, try to stay away from those fumes as much as possible. The other thing to keep in mind with welding is that it's very hard on the body. Now, I prefer shield metal arc welding, which is stick welding, because I'm moving at a good speed. If I see something starting to screw up, I could fix it. Gas metal arc welding is like a lot faster. And gas tungsten arc welding, which is TIG, is so slow I can't stand that process at all. It's too slow, and you're basically moving in slow motion. The only way I think making gas tungsten arc welding kind of fun would be to use acetylene instead of argon. Now, what's hard with the welding process is, yes, you're lifting heavy pieces of metal, but you're in awkward positions when you're welding. And you'll be like this here for maybe an hour. That's what we did in our lab. So when you do an overhead, you're sort of like this or like this, but it's strange positions. And I think that's what kills you more than anything. Because let's say you're actually in a welding lab or a welding shop and you have, I don't know, a whole bunch of trusses to make. Ideally, you want to do it flat, but if you can't, it's already set up somewhere. Well, then you might be like this for 3 hours straight. And, after about 20 minutes, you're fine. After an hour, you start to feel it. And it doesn't matter what your age is, you're definitely going to feel it over time. Something you want to always have when you're welding are these. These are glasses, and they have some UV protection to them. And whenever you're welding, you want to have this on. And of course, you want to have this when you're actually welding. And the reason for that is because you might be in a welding environment, that sort of thing. And buddy next to you might be welding, but he won't tell you I'm starting an arc. And if you just have this on, and you happen to lift this up, you're getting that flash there. Although it might not be a direct hit, you're still getting arc flash. This will protect you better than nothing, and will protect your eyes so that you don't have to end up using a spare. Now, I have a cousin who ran a welding shop, and after 30 years, he was legally blind. The reason for that, he never wore these. He always wore this, which is good, but he wore that extra bit of protection. So what you want to do is, yes, I'd love to weld in flip-flops and a t-shirt, and a baseball cap and call it a day. It's just not going to work for you. You're going to end up getting cancer for sure. Think of it this way. If you're a fireman, you're all covered up and you're working with heat. And you're still going to get cancer. That's why you get paid so much doing that job, and that's why you're definitely trading money for your health. Welding is no different. You're wearing all this huge equipment. Yeah, the shop might have air conditioning if you're very lucky, but you got to remember you're welding, and right in front of you is a massive heat source, especially if you're doing metal core arc welding. Like that heat, you feel that heat going through all your clothes. So even if there's air conditioning, it's no help. If there's a fan, how much air are you going to get through this? None. So it's a very hot process. It's a very exhausting process, but you have to take the precautions because otherwise you are definitely going to shorten your lifespan. I remember when I was in China, and literally on the sidewalk, I've never seen this before. You'd have a flower shop, and right next to that would be some guy who's making railing. And guess where he was welding all the railing, other than not wearing any PPE at all. He was just closing his eyes. And it's just so strange because everybody was just walking around him. Like there's, you know, it's just a guy welding, right? And he was doing it on the sidewalk. So here's a guy welding on the sidewalk with no protection for anything, closing his eyes. And everybody else is completely oblivious to him, just walking, you know, around the welding guy doing his stuff. That blew my mind. Now, when it comes to welding, you want to have all the clothes, you want to have the mitts, you want to have everything. And of course you want to have steel toe boots, because if you don't have that and that piece of metal falls down, your toes and your toenails will not protect you from a nice big piece of metal, especially when it's sharp and ground down. Your toe's done. Now, when it comes to welding, anybody who could sort of somehow weld two pieces of metal together, they call themselves a welder. I went to college for 2 years. I would not call myself a welder. I'm a guy who could weld. Now, I have more education than most welders, and the reason for that is because we did all the different processes. And now, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I did metal core arc welding, which is kind of fun too. So I did all the processes that you can do in a lab. So gas metal arc welding, gas tungsten arc welding, sheet metal arc welding. I'm forgetting one for some reason, but flux core arc welding. We did that flat, horizontal, vertical, and overhead. So all 4 positions. That taught me tremendous amount of skill. The biggest skill it taught me was involuntary movement. When you're welding, especially with sheet metal arc welding, it's very finicky regarding travel distance, speed. You're basically in a 3D space where every little movement that you do affects the weld puddle, the visuals of it. So if you're shaky like this, you actually see it in the weld puddle that you're shaky like that. And the teachers would right away point out, oh, I know you're thinking something else over here. And then you look at the weld puddle and you're like, yeah, you're right. Like this looks different than this. Why is that? And it's a continual improvement process. Nothing helped my hand-eye coordination better than welding. I'm 49 years old and I was starting to shake a little bit involuntary. And after 2 years of welding in college, I don't have that anymore, it's gone. The reason for that is because when you're welding, you have to be tremendously skilled at not moving. And you gotta be in a 3D space, basically. So every little thing like this here affects the weld puddle and affects the visuals. So you wanna do is improve it so that all that stuff is gone. And that helps tremendously. You also get a lot of satisfaction from welding. It's a lot of fun. You're cutting up metal, it's loud, it's smoky, you know, it's a really enjoyable process to do, especially when you're getting paid to do it. And when I do stuff here in the shop, you know, if I have a welding job to do, I take all the precautions, but I also get a lot of satisfaction from handing something to the customer and saying, here's what I did. And they take a look at it. Most of the time they're not welders at all, but I know what I did. And I could, you know, take a look at the weld puddle, you know, take a look at this, take a look at that. And they go, oh, that looks pretty nice. And I'm like, yeah, you know, that took 2 years to be able to get to that point. So another thing to keep in mind is a lot of people call themselves welders. I went to a skills trade event or show or whatever you want to call it. And there was a guy there, you know, the MC said, is there any welders here who've welded before? And I said, you know, I raised my hand, I said, you know, I've been at college for a year at that point. And yeah, I could weld somewhat, you know, I know a little bit of what I'm doing. Then another guy stood up right away and says, I've been welding in the field for 9 years. You know, I'm definitely a welder, blah, 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 blah. So then what happens is they bring us to a lab and they say, okay, let's weld. Let's see how well you can do your stuff. The worst welder was that guy who was 9 years in the field. And why is that? Well, welding has a lot of different processes. So he was really, really good at gas metal arc welding, apparently. We didn't do that in the lab. But he never did shield metal arc welding. So because he never did that, he didn't know about all the things that can happen that can go good and bad with it. So therefore, he's a good welder for gas metal arc welding, but he's an awful welder for shield metal arc welding. So welding is a massive field, and you gotta be, I think, more specific when you say, yeah, I'm a welder. No, which process are you a welder at? So that's all I have to say about welding for right now. If you have any questions about it, contact me at CNCKing.com. And of course, we do your welding jobs, cut them up, etch them, and so forth. And of course, if you want more information, you can check out my book.